Is Grandpa behaving himself, Rachel? Sort of, Rachel replied, but he hurt his leg. Old people can be such a handful sometimes. I just wish they'd think about how hard it is for those of us who have to take care of them. Julie, that's not a kind thing to say, someone else chimed in. It's fine, Rachel said with a sigh. He's already declining quite a bit. I can't deal with the stress that comes with taking care of the elderly, but you're more experienced, so you'll manage. A few days ago, Rachel's husband's grandfather, Adam, fell while working in the garden and injured his leg. Thankfully, it wasn't a severe injury, but considering he's 85 years old, they decided to have him rest in bed to ensure the injury doesn't worsen. Unfortunately, Rachel's mother-in-law refuses to go near him, let alone help with his care. Rachel, a 34-year-old woman, has been married for 6 years and lives with her husband Jacob's family. Her husband was her boss at the company where she started working 10 years ago. The company was originally founded by Jacob's grandfather. By the time Rachel joined, her father-in-law was already the president, and her grandfather-in-law was the chairman. Despite his age, the grandfather was still actively involved in managing the company's critical responsibilities. 3 years ago, when Grandpa Adam turned 85, he decided to step back from most of his public duties, though he remained the chairman. He handed over the majority of his responsibilities to Andrew, Rachel's father-in-law. You've worked hard all these years, Adam. Now it's time for you to relax and let Andrew handle the company matters, her mother-in-law said with a smile, though to Rachel, her words sounded more sarcastic than supportive. Rachel's grandfather-in-law, though a bit stubborn, is known to be a fair and kind person, respected by many. In contrast, her father-in-law seems less mature and often comes across as indecisive and unreliable, especially when compared to Grandpa Adam. He tends to follow whatever his wife says, without much thought. Rachel never met her grandmother-in-law, as she passed away before Rachel entered the family. Rachel and Jacob started dating when they worked together on the same product planning team, 5 years after she joined the company. Jacob, who led the team with energy and confidence, struck Rachel as reliable, though sometimes a bit too self-assured. Perhaps this trait stood out to Rachel because she lost her father at a young age and was raised by her mother alone. Tragically, her mother also passed away due to illness 3 years ago, leaving Rachel without any immediate family other than her in-laws. Shortly after their marriage, Rachel's mother fell ill and needed care, adding more pressure to Rachel's already challenging life. I decided to quit my job to take care of my mother when she fell ill. The fact that my husband's family didn't object was likely due to something Grandpa said. It's only natural to take care of the mother who raised you on her own. Don't worry, just focus on taking good care of her. Those words gave me the reassurance I needed, and thanks to Grandpa's support, I was able to stay by my mother's side every day for a whole year without worrying about money until she eventually passed away. Although my mother-in-law seemed a bit unhappy about my decision, I was incredibly grateful for Grandpa's understanding. However, things began to change after Grandpa handed over the company to my father-in-law. I started to notice that everyone's attitudes towards Grandpa gradually shifted. They didn't seem to listen to his opinions as much, and it felt like they were treating him with less care and respect. At first, I thought maybe I was just imagining it, but the more I observed my mother-in-law and husband, the more convinced I became that they were being dismissive toward him. My father-in-law, Andrew, didn't seem to take a strong stance either way. He acted indifferent, almost as if he was ignoring Grandpa now that he was practically retired. It felt like they were treating Grandpa as if he was no longer needed, and that made me upset. One day, I couldn't hold it in any longer. Don't you think your attitude towards Grandpa is a bit cold? I asked Julie, my mother-in-law. And you too, Jacob, I added, turning to my husband. So, what if it is? Julie replied, dismissively. Grandpa tries to talk to you, and you barely respond. You don't even try to help him, I said, trying to make them see how they were acting. I don't have time to deal with old people, Julie snapped back. You can take care of Grandpa if you want to. You're the one with free time. You don't have to talk like that, I said, feeling frustrated. Quiet, I'm tired from work. Don't bother me with unnecessary things, Jacob added, clearly not interested in discussing it further. No matter what I said, they wouldn't listen to me. Grandpa, on the other hand, never complained or said anything about how he was being treated. He just quietly accepted it. Now, I'm the only one in the house who talks to him. One day, I approached Grandpa and said, "The weather is nice today, Grandpa. Shall we go for a little walk outside? Your leg seems to be healing well, and I think it would be good for your rehabilitation." "Thank you," he replied with a gentle smile. "Let's go out for a bit then." We went to a nearby park, where several families were enjoying the day, children running around and playing. Grandpa watched the scene with a look of joy on his face. "Andrew and Jacob used to enjoy times like that too," he said, his voice tinged with nostalgia. "I was so busy with work that I couldn't take care of the children much. Maybe that's why I didn't raise Andrew and Jacob properly," he added, almost as if he was talking to himself, his expression a bit sad. Hearing him say that made me think about how everyone could be kinder to Grandpa. But no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't come up with a good idea. Then, out of the blue, my in-laws suggested building a new house for Grandpa. "This house is over 53 years old, right?" they said, as if the age of the house was the problem. "The current layout of the house is inconvenient, and it's hard to use. Rather than pouring money into repairs, it would be better to build a new house in a more convenient location. A new house could be designed with Adam's needs in mind, especially since he's getting older. We were lucky that his last injury wasn't more serious, but we can't predict what might happen in the future. It makes sense to build a house that's barrier-free, so we won't have any issues if he ever needs special care." "I see," someone suggested. "We could even place Adam's room in the center of the house, so it's easy for everyone to take care of him." "Yeah, that's not a bad idea," another agreed. "So it's settled then," they concluded. Adam, as usual, offered to cover the cost. "If it's a house for all of us, I'll handle the expenses. Just talk to Mr. James about the money," he said in his typical fashion. "Thank you, we really appreciate it," my mother-in-law said with a smile. She seemed pleased, but to me, it looked like they only flatter him when they want something, especially money. Despite my reservations, I thought that if moving to a new house meant everyone would take better care of my grandfather-in-law, it would be a positive change. Mr. James, who is the company's in-house counsel and also manages my grandfather-in-law's personal assets, would handle the financial matters. Grandpa trusted him completely, as Mr. James had been with the family for nearly 34 years. He's 61 now, and from what I've seen, he's an honest and caring person. Sometimes, it feels like he's more of a son to Grandpa than his actual sons are. Knowing that Grandpa had someone like Mr. James looking out for him gave me some peace of mind. I wasn't kept in the loop about the details of the new house, but my mother-in-law seemed very excited. She, my father-in-law, and my husband spent a lot of time looking at interior design magazines and discussing various ideas, so it seemed like everything was going smoothly. Then something unexpected happened. We found out that my grandfather-in-law had a debt of $3,500,000. Wait, what's this about $3,500,000? I exclaimed, shocked by the amount. It turned out that my grandfather-in-law had co-signed a loan for a friend's company, but that company was now in trouble, and the debt had fallen on Grandpa's shoulders. "Wait, they're not going to take the house that's under construction, are they?" I asked, worried. "Since the contract is already completed and, as Julie mentioned, the house is in the president's name, it's fine," my mother-in-law said, sounding relieved. "Oh, thank goodness. I'm glad we did it my way," she added, clearly pleased with herself. Listening to their conversation, I learned for the first time that the new house was actually in my father-in-law's name, even though my grandfather-in-law was the one paying for it. It seemed like exactly the kind of thing my mother-in-law would orchestrate. I couldn't help but wonder why they didn't consider selling the house to help repay the debt. "Hey, this debt is Adam's problem. It doesn't involve us or the company, right?" I asked, trying to understand the situation better. "Well, it was signed in Adam's name, so we're all good." "There's no problem," they assured me, dismissing any concerns. I couldn't quite grasp what was so good about the situation, but since my grandfather-in-law didn't say anything during the conversation, I chose not to intervene either. After all, it wasn't something I could handle on my own. A few days later, I began to notice a gradual change in Grandpa's behavior. One day, I asked him, "Grandpa, what would you like to eat for lunch?" He responded, "Who are you calling Grandpa? I'm only 53. You have no right to call me that." I was taken aback. "Huh? Sorry, it's me, Rachel," I said, confused. It seemed like he was lost in thought. At first, I thought he was just distracted, but as this happened repeatedly, I started to feel uneasy. Then another incident occurred. "Julie, what are you doing? Where's my meal?" he demanded. "Grandpa, I'm Rachel. Julie is your daughter-in-law. You already ate your meal earlier," I reminded him gently. "I didn't eat. Are you trying to starve me?" he snapped back. I began to wonder if his condition was triggered by the stress of the $3,500,000 debt. It might have been a double shock for him, especially seeing that none of his family members were stepping up to help. I tried to convince Grandpa to go to the hospital, but he adamantly refused. It seemed like he didn't want to admit the possibility of having dementia. I didn't want to force him, but I felt completely helpless on my own. I turned to my husband for support, but he brushed it off, saying it had nothing to do with him. My mother-in-law wasn't any help either, so I approached my father-in-law as a last resort. "I've heard from Julie and Jacob that they think it might be dementia. Can you come with us to the hospital?" I asked him. "It's not that bad yet, right? If we go to the hospital, people will find out my father has dementia," he replied, clearly concerned about appearances. "There are good medications now that can slow the progression," I suggested, hoping to change his mind. "Well, there's no need to rush. Let's watch him a little longer. Rachel is here, so they'll be fine, right?" he said dismissively. I couldn't help but feel frustrated by their lack of concern. I felt like I couldn't rely on them at all. "Grandpa, let's go to the hospital and get you properly examined," I urged him again. "Who are you? Where are you planning to take me?" "You're up to no good," he retorted, clearly suspicious of me. Tears welled up in my eyes as I saw how stubborn and unrecognizable my once kind grandfather-in-law had become. But instead of offering any support, my mother-in-law just laughed, seemingly amused by the situation. Even if he was the chairman, it's over for him now. "But now, everything, even the company, is all Andrew's," she remarked casually. "Julie, Grandpa isn't completely unaware. He's still listening to everything," I pointed out, trying to make her see how heartless she was being. "He'll forget everything soon. He'll start wandering and drooling. Just thinking about it gives me chills." "He's nothing but a nuisance now," she replied coldly, as if he no longer mattered. The more I listened to them, the more I realized how alone Grandpa and I were in this situation. I couldn't stay quiet any longer. "How can you say that? Grandpa has worked hard for this family all his life," I protested. My mother-in-law's words made me both angry and sad. But then, to my surprise, Grandpa just smiled, as if he didn't understand the hurtful things she was saying. "See, this old man doesn't understand anything," Julie added with a laugh. I was furious at my mother-in-law's callousness, but I held on to a faint hope that things might change once we moved into the new house. After all, it was a house Grandpa built for the family. Maybe then, they would show some gratitude and be kinder to him. I couldn't completely let go of that hope. 3 months later, the new house was finally ready. For days leading up to the move, I found myself packing up my in-laws' and husband's belongings while my own and my father-in-law's things were mostly untouched. Whenever I tried to organize my stuff, they kept assigning me more tasks, leaving me no time to prepare. But I told myself it would be okay. I could move the smaller items later, since the old house wasn't going anywhere. On moving day, after most of the belongings were transferred, I went to call my father-in-law. But my husband stopped me. "You and Grandpa can stay here," he announced. "What?" I asked, shocked by his words. "You can stay in this house. We don't need any extra baggage in the new house. In other words, you and Grandpa will live here from now on," he said, his tone cold. "Oh, and I'll give you Grandpa's debt too. At least you can be a housekeeper," he added with a smirk. Then, without another word, he turned and called out to the others, "Hey, let's go." "Yeah, I'm coming," my mother-in-law replied. "Good luck with all the debt repayment and taking care of Grandpa," she added cheerfully as they all left. I stood there, stunned. For a while, I couldn't comprehend what had just happened. Were we really abandoned? Not just me, but my grandfather-in-law too? It took some time for the reality to sink in because I couldn't believe someone could be so heartless. How was I going to explain this to Grandpa? Slowly, I made my way to the back room. I didn't mind caring for Grandpa, that had always been my intention. But this situation was different from anything I had imagined. As I approached, I noticed Grandpa sitting with his back to me. Sensing my presence, he turned around before I could speak. "Have they gone already?" he asked, his expression completely different from what it had been just a few months ago. To be honest, he seemed like a different person. For a moment, I wondered if a new symptom had emerged. But then, to my surprise, Grandpa smiled, and what he said next caught me completely off guard. As we were talking, Mr. James, the company's in-house counsel, walked in. "Chairman, have you finished getting rid of the unnecessary staff?" he asked. "Yes, it's all done," Grandpa replied calmly. "Shall we go?" "Where are we going?" I stammered, still trying to process everything. "Of course, to the new house," Grandpa said. And with that, we left the house together. I was still living in the old house, guided by my grandfather-in-law, not fully understanding what was happening. Over the next month, my mother-in-law and husband bombarded me with countless phone calls. My grandfather-in-law had decided he wouldn't entertain their calls anymore, but I felt I had to answer my husband's call, especially since we were on the brink of a divorce. "Hey, Rachel, is Grandpa with you?" When I went to the old house, it was up for sale. "It's not worth $3,500,000, so you can't repay the debt." "Is that why you did this?" My husband accused, his tone sharp. "What do you mean?" "Put Grandpa on the phone. Dad said he hasn't been able to reach him at all. That forgetful old man must have done something outrageous," he continued, clearly agitated. I knew exactly what he was talking about, but I wanted to hear it from him. "What happened?" I asked. "Grandpa sold the company's stocks to the executive director. Thanks to that, the executive director is now the largest shareholder. A shareholders' meeting and a board meeting were held, and Dad was dismissed as president. But the executive director is popular. Maybe Grandpa thought it was better to hand over the company to him. The executive director must have tricked that old man into selling the stocks." "This is invalid," my husband fumed. "You seem to be misunderstanding something," I replied calmly. "Grandpa doesn't have dementia. If anything, he's more clear-headed than before." "What?" My husband sounded shocked. Up until the day we were supposed to move, I truly believed my grandfather-in-law had dementia. But it turns out, he suspected something from the moment my mother-in-law mentioned building a new house to live with him. So he came up with a plan. He pretended to have dementia to observe how my in-laws and husband would react. Just as he anticipated, they each revealed their true colors one by one. In the end, they left my grandfather-in-law and me behind. I struggled to hold back my laughter because everything unfolded exactly as Grandpa had expected. When I finally spoke to him about it, he said something that left me surprised, relieved, and a bit conflicted. "To deceive your enemies, you must first deceive your allies," Grandpa chuckled. It turned out that he had been receiving regular updates on the company from the executive director and Mr. James. With Grandpa out of the picture, my father-in-law and husband had been doing whatever they pleased, acting self-righteous and completely ignoring the opinions of the employees, often hosting lavish parties at the company's expense. Eventually, Grandpa handed over the company to my father-in-law, but he had serious concerns about the future. Seeing how things were going, he decided he couldn't trust his son with the company and chose to leave it in the hands of the executive director instead. When my husband asked about the $3,500,000 debt, I calmly explained, "That's taken care of now." In reality, my grandfather-in-law had been a guarantor for a friend's debt, but he had personal assets that far exceeded that amount. However, I deliberately left out this detail to prevent my mother-in-law and husband from targeting those assets. The friend in question was the son of a benefactor who had helped my father-in-law when he was young. Additionally, the land owned by this friend in the countryside was going to be developed into a resort, allowing him to sell it at a high price. I continued to explain this to my husband. "You're kidding," he exclaimed in disbelief. "More importantly, are you guys okay?" I asked, genuinely concerned. "We're not okay," my husband lamented. "Both my father and I were denounced by the company. What should we do now?" Wait, what? There's also a mortgage on the house, I revealed, dropping another bombshell.
What?
What do you mean, a mortgage on the house? My husband was shocked. Haven't you realized it yet? The money for the house should have been paid off by Grandpa, I clarified. But Andrews signed, without checking everything. It just shows he really didn't have the qualities of a president. You've got to be kidding, my husband sighed, finally understanding the gravity of the situation. As a result, my in-laws lost the new house they had built because they couldn't keep up with the mortgage payments. Now they live in an old apartment that's over 53 years old, struggling to repay the remaining loan. Despite their desperate attempts to contact me, suggesting we all live together, it was no longer possible. My grandfather-in-law, having retired from his chairman position, bought an old house in the countryside. Rachel, you can live wherever you like now, freely. You don't have to worry about living expenses, he assured me. But I chose to stay with him. If I'm not in the way, please let me stay with you, I said, tears welling up in my eyes. His eyes filled with tears, too. Thanks to Mr. James, the divorce was finalized and legal steps were taken to exclude my former father-in-law and husband from any inheritance. I became my grandfather-in-law's adopted daughter, and I vowed to take care of him for the rest of his life. Now, the two of us enjoy peaceful days working in the fields together. Dad, look at this radish. It's huge, I exclaimed, cherishing these warm moments under the bright sunlight. I wish for these days to continue, even if just for one more day.